Once upon a wasteland evening, while I wandered drunk and scheming, after many days reveling in dystopian tribal lore, from upon his throne within our dwelling, Grimm heard a voice that started yelling, and suddenly a crowd was swelling, rebelling at the armory door. "'Tis drunken madness," I stuttered, causing such a huge uproar. Surely not the sounds of war. All too clearly I remember, in that dusty late September, as each separate tribal member came to settle up a score, defiantly walked up the nightmare, trying hard to start a fight there. In Main Street's center right where also stood our chief of war. Even those beyond the wall could hear the masses roar, ringing out the drums of war. In that angry crowd were tribal leaders, vicious scum and lying cheaters. Weapons threatening the dukes to what we had in store. They raised their guns and rang the chimes, but Grimm stood tall amidst the slime that accused the dukes, and namely him, of so many crimes of war. Our last allies stood as enemies, and this is what they swore. They would try our chief of war. The Duke's formation stood enraged, all our weapons then engaged. "We think not unless you want the streets flowing with your gore." There we stood, locked in standoff, till the nightmare slipped a handoff to the man that in Grimm's absence had led our tribe before. To keep the peace and save his tribe, he sold out our chief of war. "It's for the best," he swore. With blood a-boil and tears streaming, the colonel stood defiant, screaming, "Of all the nightmare's foolish grievings, Grimm has none to answer for." But so that no more were threatened, all the dukes lowered our weapons, and then the nightmare laughed and beckoned to our chief of war. "Seems to me you're alone," said he. "You've lost, and furthermore, you have crimes to answer for. And since our nefarious defendant is firm, resolved, and unrepentant, it's left to me to choose the sentence for these crimes of war. Now that all wrongs have been confessed, I deem the punishment of death is fair, unless there is request for something slightly more. But one asked for less in lieu of death, and mercy she implored. Do not kill the chief of war." The thought of Grimm, red with gashes, led him to agree to lashes, and so thrashed the executioner until his flesh was torn. Though she cracked her whip inhumanely, not a single outcry made he, with 10 or 20 lashes maybe struck upon his core. As the dukes watched Grimm endure more pain than any could stand for, stood strong our chief of war. Now after retribution managed, Grimm released, his wounds were bandaged. The nightmare declared this not the only punishment he bore. "Since my lust for pain is famished, your war chief shall now be banished. Not until you leave the city will peace finally be restored." And since we dukes did not agree, this caused a new uproar, but stood fast our chief of war. The crowd, which further still had swelled, now could hear the ringing bell that would lead the war chief through the city, followed by the horde. This the best as I recall. Somewhere beyond those city walls, Grimm turned proud to face us all, and his return he swore. There stood a man of force and power that no one could ignore. And so lived our chief of war. Some may question, some may wonder, what ground the dukes now hide under, since we lost the battle for the city and our chief of war. But listen here and you will learn that while we wait for Grimm's return, the Duke's flag is still unburned and there's much reckoning in store. Soon you all will hear the thunder, like never heard before, when we sound the drums of war.